Let's quickly revisit the topic how to write a story. So before we begin to write a story, we need to know what is a story. So what is a story all about? A story is an account of imaginary or real people and events told for entertainment. For this reason, precisely, you have plenty more freedom to write, as you can make up most of the story. But just like it happens with every other type of writing, a story must follow a particular structure which makes sense to the reader. This is very, very important. Your story should always make sense to the reader. So let's move on to the different parts of a story. So a story can roughly be divided into the following parts. So the parts of the story, the first one is title, the next one is exposition, the third is action, and the fourth one is resolution. So these are the four main parts of a story. So what is title? So your title should either summarize the whole story or have something to do with the main theme. This is very, very important. Make sure that your title and your story have some connect. Part of the story is exposition. This is where the story begins. So this is the beginning of the story where the characters and setting are established. It serves as the introduction to the next part, that is the action and so-called conflict of a story. Exposition is very, very important part of a story. So when you write a story, make sure that your story has a proper beginning, middle and an end. Now the next one is action. So in this part, the characters, obviously they deal with conflict and try to do things to solve it. The last part of the story, that is resolution. So this is where the conflict is resolved and the story concludes or ends with an ending, normally without any loose ends. So here the story comes to a close. Okay, in order to make our story more interesting, we can always use some expressions in our story. So in this section, we are going to focus on different expressions you can use in the different parts of a story. While the vocabulary used in the story will vary completely depending on the topic, there is a set of expressions which you can make use of quite frequently when you write a story. So how to begin a story? When you start a story, if the first sentence isn't given to you, you can always use phrases like this. It all began when I first, at the beginning, it was a hot, cold winter day, something like this. So you can always begin with phrases like this when you start a story. Just to be clear, these are only some simple examples which you can use. You can always use your own story starters as well if it is not given to you. If any the prompt isn't given to you, you can always use your own phrases like this. So now when we talk about expressions, use of expressions in our story, so time phrases is something that we can also use in our story. One of the great differences between writing a letter, essay, article and so on and writing a story is that you need to pay careful attention to the time over which the story develops. This is very, very important. So it is not that we are writing a letter or an essay or an article here. We are writing a story. So we need to keep in mind how the story develops. In order to define the order of the events in the story, we must use time expressions or time phrases. So let's see a few time expressions or time phrases that we can use in our story. Then after that, as soon as, while, meanwhile, a little later, a moment later. So these are a few expressions or time phrases that you can include in your story. This will show how the story is developing, or how the manner in which the story develops. Now, the next one is creating suspense. So when writing a story, the aim is not to inform or to convey information. The real purpose is to entertain the reader. Just like when you read a novel, you expect to be entertained, right? For this reason, a story should aim to do so. And a cool way to entertain is to create suspense, which we can do by using some of the following expressions. So we can always use certain expressions to create suspense. So without suspense, a story is completely boring. So these are the expressions that you can use in order to bring in some suspense in your story. We can always use direct speech in our story, because in every story there are characters and they usually interact with each other. So it's always good if you know how to use direct speech, that is, reproduce the words the characters actually say or think. The tricky part here is you should be very mindful about the punctuations and the verbs to choose, because it's good to use some verbs. So take a look at some examples over here. These are only examples. You can use direct speech based on your story, based on your characters. If you want your characters to do the talking, you want to reproduce the words of your characters, and you wanted to show what they actually say or think, then you have to use your own sentences over here. Now the ending of the story. How do we finish our story? So finishing your story, this paragraph, the resolution should be separated from the rest. So it's a good idea to use any one of the following expressions when you end your story or you finish your story. So this paragraph, the resolution should be separated from the rest. So that's the reason you should always write in clear paragraphs. So this is how you can end your story, with this kind of expressions or phrases, or if you have anything better than this also you can use. Verb tenses. One of the reasons why stories are particularly challenging is that they tend to take place in the past, which makes it necessary to use a range of past tenses appropriately. So you'd have noticed in the exam all the time, the prompt that we get is mainly in past tense. So in order to write our story in a proper manner, we need to use 3 past tenses, the verb tenses: the past simple, past continuous, and past perfect. Here are some quick tips how to write a story. So the first one is, make sure your story is always well structured and is visually appealing. Use proper sentence structure and punctuation. Write in paragraphs. Use the expressions in your story that we learnt now. Brainstorm before you write. Think what you are going to write in your story. Always keep the end in mind and then start writing your story. And of course, the most important, practice, practice, and more practice. As the saying goes, practice makes a man perfect. I hope you find these tips handy and make sure you use all these tips while you write your own story next time.